In this video, I want to talk about somatic awareness or body awareness as we are coming out of or healing as we're coming out of controlling or authoritarian environments. Body awareness is so central to all of this. It's kind of like the underlying issue in this whole topic. Somebody requested that I make a video on this, and so that's part of why I'm doing it. I've touched on this a little bit before, but I haven't gone into a lot of depth with it. And so if there's any other topics that you'd like me to make a video on, just let me know in the comments. Just a quick disclaimer here. This video is not professional advice of any kind. It is not mental health advice. I am not a mental health professional, and this is for educational purposes only. So fundamentally, what happens in these controlling environments, whether they be a family, a school, a religious organization, a relationship with somebody, whatever it may be, is we get disconnected from our own bodies because our own emotions are felt within our bodies, and empowered awareness of our own feelings is really not something that is tolerated in that kind of an environment. And so the path toward healing is largely about getting more and more connected to our own bodies. And real connection to our bodies is not allowed in these environments because it means that you have power within yourself, and you are not simply giving your power away to the environment and to the people that have power over you in that setting. And so they pull you out of your own body, out of your own emotional body, into your head, into fear, into insecurity, into the place where they can control you. And when you do have your own power, which is your own real, grounded, embodied self, you don't fit into environments like that, and you wouldn't want to be in them anyway. You do fit into much more sane, aware, evolved environments populated by more sane, wise, evolved people. Now, when it comes to somatic awareness or body awareness, I think that this is a lot of why a lot of us are so drawn to things like action movies or superhero movies, is because you have somebody who is, very empowered in their own body and is showing up in the world in a very embodied, powerful way. And we like that. We like to sort of identify with that to some extent because we're so far from that in our own lives. Most of us are, or we have been historically. And, most of us have been very kind of victimized by our environment in various ways. And so somebody who has done a lot of this work in their own lives shows up in the world in a way that is kind of a lot more like that, quite honestly. But again, we are basically trained to be diminished versions of ourselves in terms of how we show up in our physical presence. That is a lot of what our socialization does. It diminishes us, it sort of breaks us down, and then it says that it's for our own good and then gaslights us about it. And that physical presence arises from our emotional presence. So the more we are present with our own feelings in our body, fully processing them, fully dealing with them, the more we do that, then the more we show up in the world in a way that is empowered in a kind of physical sense. And so your own groundedness and kind of physical empowerment is something that can be extremely provocative for people in these environments. And we can get really viciously attacked. And often as kids, that's exactly what happens, and we're really powerless to it. And so we just get attacked to the point where we conform. Maybe we can rebel to some extent, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to conform to that in order to survive. And there are a million different projections that can get pushed onto us in order to kind of knock us out of that empowerment and that physical presence. And what's really challenging and confusing about this at first is that at first all this is just real to us, right? We don't see that it just comes from kind of the BS of the environment, the screwed up nature of it. It's just our reality. And it only becomes more clear over time, right? Over like a long period of time of really reclaiming the truth for ourselves, reconnecting with our own inner compass, or whatever you want to call that. It's like the truth of it only manifests over a long period of time. And so like this kind of false reality that we've been brainwashed into, it's just real to us at first. And it's not just in terms of somatic or body awareness that we are forced to conform to our environment. It's in all ways, right? It's emotionally and in terms of somatic awareness, but it's also intellectually. It's also in our behaviors and the choices that we make. And just a slight tangent here, but it's important, is something I'd always noticed ever since I was a kid was that people's political beliefs are almost always very similar to their parents. And I'd wondered, like, well, why is this? What's the reason for that? It's clearly not because people have thought critically about all of these issues and they've arrived at their own independent judgment. No, it's clearly because in the environments that most of us grow up in, you're expected to think a certain way. You're expected to think the way that the people that have power over you think. And if you don't, you face consequences. You face consequences like ostracization or, emotional punishment of various kinds. And so this kind of thing really makes me think, like, what do we lose as a result of environments being this way? As a result of all of these environments, all these families, all these religious organizations, all these schools being so controlling and authoritarian, what do we lose? What kind of ideas don't emerge that could help humanity? What kind of efforts that, again, could improve the human condition do we lose as a result of these extremely screwed up and sick cultures? I'm sure that what we lose is simply incalculable. And so the key to developing more of this somatic awareness and more of this kind of grounded, powerful physical presence is really about just being present with whatever is coming up for us in the moment, and then using that as an opportunity to heal. So, whatever it may be in life that is coming up for us, try to look at and then be present with and really feel the kind of underlying emotional situation there. And then really it's about kind of letting that flow through us and bringing a sort of new awareness to it. And for most of us, I would say we often need to spend a lot of time just kind of like closing our eyes and being present with that in the body, because the pain is so extreme, which is why we've had to sort of, go to our head and kind of spin in our head a lot, or we've had to go to different behaviors to soothe these things, which can look like all kinds of different things for different people, right? For some people, it's substances, or it's, their phones, or it's different like relationship dynamics, all kinds of different things, but it's because the pain is so extreme. And so it's not, for a lot of us, for a lot of the time, it's not simply a matter of, oh, okay, I'm going to feel this for a couple seconds and then it's over. It's like, no, we have to actually like close our eyes, be present with the sensation in our body, and do that as best we can. And then, see how that kind of moves within us, and hopefully over time we can start to release that. And for a lot of us, maybe at the beginning, it's really painful to do that. And so we're not able to do that in like a really mindful, sage-like way. It's like, we're closing our eyes, we're trying to be present, but we're kind of squirming and sort of moving, against that. But I think, again, it's just a matter of, and this has been my experience of just like doing the best we can to be present with that. And for me, this was really complicated at first, because it was like I would immediately start spinning in my head, and a lot of different kind of defenses were coming up, and I didn't really know how to work through all of that at first. And what happened for me was, over time, I started to kind of understand all of this better. I started to just develop more awareness of it, and I was able to kind of relax into my body more. And after a long time of doing this, eventually I started to heal right? What happened was these things started to release and kind of subside. And then I just kept doing that for a long time, over and over and over again. And I just started to heal more and more and more and more, to the point where I really felt like a very transformed person. And different people need different things to get there. I think that we all have our own like recipe for this that can be very, very individual. Some people feel like they need like psychedelics or plant medicine or whatever in order to get to that place. Some people, maybe they need a lot of meditation. For me, I kind of needed a combination of things. So now I want to talk a little bit about the kind of context for this, and part of what makes it difficult to do this, and maybe understanding this a bit better can help us to kind of navigate this whole process better. So one of the things that makes it so difficult to do this is because it's simply not supported in the culture, right? Real major transformation, like at a body level, is just not something that's normal. It's not something that's common. And it's very hard to find people that can actually help you with it, or can kind of show some way of doing it. The ones that can, often, you have to pay them a lot of money, right? They don't like put out resources for free, which is part of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to, share the things that I've learned for free on here. And also often, therapists, for the most part, my experience has been that therapists have no clue about any of this because they haven't done it themselves. And so they don't have any knowledge about this. And often they are very much still tied up with these very screwed up controlling cultures. And so they just kind of bring a lot of that same thinking and that same programming to us, and they just make it worse. And so we're led to believe that these people are qualified to help us, but so often they're not. Now, this isn't to discourage anybody from seeking a therapist, because, I've certainly encountered a couple who I did feel like were really helpful and did understand a lot of things. But again, they can only help us so much with this, right? At the end of the day, like, what I found is that I still had to do most of this on my own, because it just takes so much work to actually heal and, fully develop your own power again after coming out of these settings. Another thing that really makes it hard to do this is that it's simply like, it doesn't fit in terms of where the culture is at. And this is something I've been alluding to, which is that if we are going to do this, we are sort of somehow like leapfrogging the culture. We're like leapfrogging most of where things are at in terms of like the collective awareness. And part of that is cool, of course. I mean, I think that's super cool, but it's also really difficult. And also then people are going to project different things onto you, right? Because like you might be stirring up things in other people that they haven't dealt with, just because of your vibe, just because now you're more honest and more alive and more empowered. And so that's challenging, right? How do you navigate that? Because people can get pretty nasty. Of course, I certainly don't want to stir up fear here, because I'm not saying that this has to be dangerous or anything like that, but I do think, there can be pitfalls as we navigate the people around us as we start to actually heal. But again, as I've sort of been, I think, alluding to, part of this whole process is that it's pushing us to become kind of leaders in the culture on some level, whether we like it or not, right? We're sort of at the frontier of consciousness. And so we are kind of like representing sort of a new way of showing up in the world, simply because we want to actually heal and empower ourselves in all ways, somatically, emotionally, intellectually, creatively. Something that really illustrated this for me in my own life was seeing those kind of rare, very rare individuals who really did embody this, who really like did show up with so much of their own kind of power, and like the way that you felt around them was just amazing because of this. And these people, like, they clearly did not fit into very authoritarian, controlling environments. They clearly were different. And often I think they were pushed towards being that way because things were just so painful for them earlier in life. And I think a lot of times, like, this is kind of what happens for people that are, you could say, more sensitive, or they feel things more deeply or whatever, is they just can't put up with this anymore. Like, it's a matter of do or die. And so that's why often, more sensitive people become these kind of leaders in this way, is because the status quo of that culture just doesn't work for them. So they have to figure out a different and a better way to operate, right? They have to figure out how to actually heal, or else things are just too painful. They just can't survive. Now, the final thing that I will touch on here is something that I've already alluded to, which is that the more that you really do this work of like healing and getting more in touch with your own body, and you figure out how to do that in a way that works for you, and you do that over a long period of time, the more it becomes clear just the sheer cost of these kind of settings, right? Just how harmful they really are, these controlling and authoritarian environments, and the people that operate within them that don't actually have any accountability. Just the sheer cost in terms of well-being and all the joy that's killed because of it, all the good relationships and all the contributions that are destroyed because of it. And you really are able to see just how sick and deranged these kind of environments are. And while it is difficult to see that, it's also quite validating, and really just helps to kind of provide a lot of clarity and perhaps some further healing. So these are just some of my quick thoughts here on somatic or body awareness as we are coming out of these controlling and authoritarian environments. I, of course, will have a lot more videos on this that are going to touch on different aspects of this. So please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Please also share this video with anybody who you think might enjoy it and might find it helpful. Please also, if there's anything else that you'd like me to cover in a future video, please share it in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end, and I look forward to having you next time.